After 26 years, we finally got the news that a new treatment for androgenetic alopecia has been finally approved and soon to be available for sale in Europe as soon as next week. This comes after a long time since we've got a new FDA-approved treatment in 1997, talking about finasteride, of course. So in this video, we're gonna go through all you need to know before you buy CosmeRNA. We're gonna divide this video into two parts. We're firstly going to talk about the good news that we got about this compound and its advantages and how it compares to conventional treatments like finasteride and pyrolutamide. And secondly, we're going to talk about its weakness spots that some of them may actually put some of you off from buying it. And in the end of the video, I'm going to share the estimated price for CosmeRNA, so make sure to keep watching the video until the end. But before jumping right into the subject, I wanted to go ahead and subscribe to my channel to stay up to date with any future hair loss treatments or new released data. I post here regularly. And right away, let's start off with the good news. And the first thing that I want to speak about here is the efficacy of CosmeRNA and how it compares to finasteride and even pyrolutamide. And I was shocked when I first read this article and the results of CosmeRNA, and impressed may be a better word. To put you into perspective, it's already established that using finasteride 1 mg a day for the duration of 24 weeks, and this has been proved through various clinical research, yields about 9 to 10 hairs per square centimeter improvement in hair count from baseline versus placebo. In the case of pyrolutamide, and we discussed the phase 2 clinical trials about pyrolutamide, where this data was originally presented, you can go ahead and watch it. But in the case of pyrolutamide, using pyrolutamide twice a day for the duration of 24 weeks, which is equivalent to 6 months, yielded about 15 to 16 hairs per square centimeter improvement from baseline versus placebo. But in the case of CosmeRNA, and keep in mind this is a cosmeceutical product, its usage for the duration of 24 weeks, 6 months, yielded an improvement of 8.1 hairs per square centimeter versus placebo from baseline, which is just amazing to hear. I mean, this is about 80% of the efficacy of finasteride, and the most amazing part that CosmeRNA and pyrolutamide and finasteride do not share the same mechanism. So if this data comes out right, and it should be, I mean, the article was published in Nature magazine, which is one of the most prestigious medical magazines, this should be a huge news, because we can potentially use finasteride in conjunction with CosmeRNA, and in the future maybe pyrolutamide, to yield a 30 plus hair count per square centimeter improvement from baseline. So this is amazing. But keep in mind, we're only talking about CosmeRNA for the duration of 24 weeks. This study only covers the treatment for the duration of 24 weeks, and I compared it to finasteride and pyrolutamide for the duration of 24 weeks. We know that finasteride's efficacy keeps improving and actually reaches its peak in about 2 years or so. And the second strength point about CosmeRNA is that it's a once-a-week treatment. So in the original study that led to this approval, there was actually 2 studies conducted by the authors. The first study was a low dose 3 times per week study. The concentration here was 0.5 milligrams per milliliter, and the results that were found in this study were unsatisfactory. But here comes the second study, the results of which I talked about in the first point that I made. The second study was actually a high dose study. The concentration of the compound here was about 5 milligrams per milliliter, and the application frequency was only once a week, as opposed to 3 times a week in the low dose first study. And it was actually in this study that we found the good results that we spoke about in the first point. So this is the administering protocol that should be followed by the patients that will use CosmeRNA. And this is a huge point, guys, because keep this in mind. An easier administering protocol and an easier way to apply the whichever drug on your scalp is associated with a better follow-up or better adherence to that treatment. You can compare that to some people that use minoxidil twice a day. So the point that I want to make here is the fact that this treatment is intended to be used only once a week will make a lot more patients adhere to it and actually do use it once a week. Therefore, the results will be similar to the results that were found in this study, and more patients would be satisfied with the product. And the third strength point about CosmeRNA is actually the pharmaceutical group of drugs that it belongs to. CosmeRNA has been made with a technology called SiRNA. That's the abbreviation for small interfering RNA. And the good news here is that we already have some drugs that are FDA approved that actually use this same technology. So we are pretty familiar with small interfering RNA drugs and their efficacy, and we do know that they deliver in terms of doing what they're intended to do. And basically, small interfering RNA is this way for our body to silence some genes. They do that by interfering with the second step of DNA synthesis. That's called the translation step, where a mRNA sequence is translated into a protein. So if we have a protein that we do not like and that protein causes some problems, like in this case, androgen receptors, for example, these are proteins that cause some problems in terms of making our hair fall. So if we do not wish for that protein to be synthesized anymore and produced, we can simply use small interfering RNA to interfere with the second step of its synthesis, and therefore that protein would not be synthesized anymore. That, of course, is a pretty simplified version of how it all happens. But the point that I wanted to make here is that small interfering RNA is not a new technology. There's already in the market FDA-approved treatments that went through various clinical trials that work with this same technology, and that gives me confidence that this will probably deliver and it actually works. As opposed to GT20029, actually, that is a new pharmaceutical group of drugs, PROTACs, proteolysis targeting chimera. I've talked extensively about GT20029 in another video, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't work, but it just makes us more prudent and makes us work even harder to assess the efficacy of proteolysis targeting chimera. But in the case of CosmeRNA, the fact that small interfering RNA is used in various FDA-approved drugs since 2018, this gives me immense confidence in CosmeRNA. And the last strength point that I wanted to mention about CosmeRNA is that it would actually be an OTC medication, meaning over-the-counter. You should not have to show a doctor's prescription to get CosmeRNA, and this should ease the access to the product from patients that seek using it. And it was actually this way because CosmeRNA was registered and approved through a different portal that's called the Cosmeceutical Products European Portal, as opposed to other medications that seek the approval through the FDA, which is a much more strict process. And now to the bad news, or the weakness spots about CosmeRNA. But before going ahead and watching the second part, please make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and click on that like button if you're enjoying the video so far. And the first thing that I want to mention about the weakness spots or the disadvantages of this compound is the safety. And not actually the safety, rather than the approach that the article took to assess the safety of this compound. And the first thing you want to notice here is that how big this article is and how little the paragraph that was written about the safety of CosmeRNA. There's a lot of emphasis on the histological and biological markers to assess the safety rather than the clinical symptoms, which is a wrong thing. Our professors have always told us to focus and treat symptoms, not instruments. Symptoms, not biological markers. So I feel that this aspect of this study is lacking a little bit. But don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that the compound is not safe. Actually, in this study, 108 subjects participated, and only one subject in the treatment group in the high-dose study developed erythema, edema, and itching at the test site. But the symptoms were relieved after diagnosis and treatment by a dermatologist. And these are probably adverse events associated with the topical administration rather than any systemic absorption. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that this compound is probably not safe, but I just wished that the authors went even more details to make this compound as safe as possible in the production process. And the second weakness point that I spotted in this compound is that there's a little bit of a conflict of interest in terms of the authors that participated in making the study that led to the approval of CosmeRNA. This doesn't mean that the study was rigged or something like that, not at all. After all, it was published in Nature magazine. I just wanted to mention it as I noticed it when I was reading the article. And this actually happens in a lot of clinical studies. It just brings another variable onto the table that could have been avoided. And the last and maybe the biggest weakness spot in this compound potentially is the price. This will not be a cheap treatment for androgenetic alopecia. Small interfering RNA is a new technology. The way to produce an mRNA sequence in the laboratory and actually put it into nanoparticles to create the SAMiRNA, and the whole process is not a simple process. It takes a lot of time and a lot of experts. So I would not, if I could make an estimate, it would not be cheaper than $400. Again, this is pure speculation. I don't have any idea whatsoever from the company. I tried looking on the internet, but I couldn't find any information. This company, to be honest, could work a little bit more on their PA side of things. But if I could make an estimate, I would say $400 as minimum. But remember, this is a weekly treatment that's intended to be only used once a week. So even if it's maybe $400, even $500, if we include the fact that it would be used only once a week, that would make it maybe relatively cheaper. So in a nutshell, this is nothing but great news for the hair loss community. This strengthens our arsenal in face of androgenetic alopecia and brings another alternative to the table in terms of combating DHT, or in this case, androgen receptors on hair follicles. If you're interested in other alternatives and other options to treat this condition, make sure to watch my videos about verteporfin, GT20029, or pyrolutamide. And if I can share my opinion here, I would say that verteporfin is the leading candidate that will maybe, in my opinion, cure hair loss in the next couple of months, even maybe before the end of 2024. If you're interested about what I just said, make sure to watch the video on verteporfin to understand more details about it. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching the video. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe if you found it informative. And as always, stay safe.